Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Monday Morning Jumpstart with Ted Capshaw. Hi, Ted.
Hey.
I wonder how many times I've said okay. While he's not listening, I wonder how many times I've said Ted's name over the last few years.
Well,
right? A lot of times.
At least 75.
Just to recap for anyone listening to us for the first time, we were talking about 4 pillars that are going to help you build a business, because being a writer is lovely, but if you want to be a successful writer that has income coming in, you're a business person and you're in business. We've talked about culture and community, systems and techniques. Last week, we talked about finance, very important. And this week, I think it feeds into that. So we're talking about sales, Ted. So what do you mean when you talk about sales and having a sales funnel? And I think I look at it as opportunity. But how do you want to frame this up?
Well, I want to follow the same flow that I talked about. As you know, some of this is mindset stuff, like the shift in how you perceive yourself and what you say you are and the rest of that. So let's layer that on. So first, that shift that I want you to take. Yes, you're a writer. Yes, you're a business person. And yes, absolutely yes, you're a salesperson. Mm-hmm. Now, this is one that I push back on and push back on and push back on so freaking hard in the beginning, like I'm never going to sell. I shared with Jade before that I wanted to become a referral-based business, which I am, right? I don't do active sales, and yet I'm still a salesperson. Mm-hmm. In every engagement that I have, back to the connection piece and all the rest of that. But some people get so rooted in that they're not a salesperson. You have taken yourself and your skill set and now are asking for an exchange of money. You're in sales. So I want you to shift into this idea, and sales isn't bad. So I want you to get that, because some people go, I'm not a salesperson. They're slimy and they're just out to make a bunch of money and all of it. Lose all that. It is necessary in business to sell yourself and to sell your skill set. So that's the first thing that I really want you to adopt. And being transparent with you, it was one that I pushed back on so adamantly in the beginning, but now I recognize I am my product and I'm absolutely in sales, right? Now, it lines up with my values and all the rest of that. So I'm not going to retract on all that. But this idea of sales, going back to the system and techniques, one of the things that the reason I'm going back to system and techniques, I do believe you need to come up with what is your system to sell, right? And that may be
okay.
Well, when I say system, it doesn't mean it's this complex thing. You mentioned on that call the CRM, which is customer relations manager is what it stands for. If people don't know what it stands for, or something like that. Yeah. But this idea that you made a call or you made an email and now you're tracking the progress of that email. They didn't follow up. It requires me to follow up. It'll ding you. You need to follow up with that person, or they followed up and now I need to make a proposal to them. And it just tracks this evolution of where things are, right? Mm-hmm. The reason Jade and I flipped the script on this is because the finance piece should come before sales, because if you've made financial goals like we suggested last week, now you have to have sales. Now grab this, sales activity that is going to support your goal. So if you have this $50,000 revenue goal and you look at your sales activity and you realize I'm only reaching out to a potential client, which they call prospect in sales. If I'm reaching out to a potential client one time a week, that's probably not going to get you to $50,000 in sales. So now you got to go back and look at what activity that you need. And it's a discovery process. Eventually, you will find this formula that says, in the past 6 months, when I was sending out 5 emails a day, eventually I was coming up with 1 new client a month, which equaled X revenue, and you'll be able to adjust your activity. But sales is so critically important. Now, if you aspire to be a referral-based business like I was, just expect that to take a couple years, right? Mm-hmm. You got to get clients, you need to do great work and all the rest of that. But one, I don't want to get preachy on the sales piece, but here's the thing. You are a salesperson. You need to do your work around accepting that. Doesn't mean you're slimy. It means that you're a salesperson and you have to sell. And
you're in business. That's what it means.
You're in business. Yeah. And then how are you selling, right? Are you comfortable with the close, as they say? So how are you selling means how are you reaching out to potential clients? I often say, Jade, a sales funnel for me is very simple. It's not complex. We talked about finance last week. It doesn't have to be complex. If you just had a sheet of paper and you said leads. So we go back to this idea that I want to work with 10 companies. And here's a list of 50 companies in this space that I potentially could work with. You now have the start to a sales funnel, but that requires work. You have to go do the research. What are the companies, my proximity, where I can work? But you have developed a list of 50 companies. Let's just start there. So that's the lead list, right? And then you would go to just cold, warm, hot. Cold would be, I haven't reached out to them at all. I haven't tried to call them, text them, email them, hit them on LinkedIn or whatever. That's the cold list. So you know you've not reached out to them. Warm would be, I've now put something out to them. A LinkedIn, call, email, something. And then hot would be, we are in conversation about working together. But on any given day, you could look at that list and go, all right, I have 2 hot leads. I'm out of, but the lead list, I've worked my way through it. Now, what would you have to do? I'm just messing with you.
Again. Research again. Who can
exactly, you'd have to research again, because what happens in business is you may have a client list, but if you're not proactively staying ahead of getting new leads and prospects, eventually the well's going to run dry and you're going to find yourself regenerating, frantic, and all the rest of it.
So I think being in businesses and like becoming a writer in businesses, you're learning skills, right? So whatever skill that you can sell, you're learning business acumen, which is what we're talking about now, like what it means to be in business. And then you're marketing yourself constantly, right? So when we talked about the first, I think it was the first session or second session, systems and techniques about your calendar and how you structure it, I think if you can think of it that you know that you need to fulfill those 3 buckets, right? And then again, like how we talked about almost every time, about how it doesn't need to be that complex. Another way to also think about the leads and also think about the hot, warm, cold is that for that, you can start out with everybody you know, right? Like I can't tell you how many members we've had with their first clients is somebody they know, because all the person needs to have is own a business or need writing for their business, right? So it's a simple Facebook inbox message of like, hey, I'm taking on this new venture. I'm, a copywriter that grows sales in this area. If you know anybody that would be interested in that, I would love you to refer them to me. Like, this is my details, right? Start with there, all your LinkedIn connections, anyone who you have an email to. Malcolm Katz is an amazing resource when he talks about this. I think you've been on screen together where he's like, he'll like for Ted, I'll be like, say I was going into business. Ted, how are the boys? How's it going? Are they excited for the summer? So a touch base on, getting to know you. And that's how the conversation starts. Yeah. And then Ted inevitably is going to ask me about me. And then I talk about my transition into this new business, and like, so starting it with a conversation like that. And I think that it eases up the selling of yourself worry, and it eases up the cold reach out worry. Yeah. You have to have all those other things in place that we've been talking about in order to be prepped and primed to make that reach out possible,
Well, there's so much to sales to go into. You're going into another leg of it. Michael, he's way right. I am not a sales trainer. I'm not a sales expert. Mm-hmm. My main point today is that, one, you have to adopt the mindset that you are a salesperson, you're in business, which takes us back 3 weeks when Jade introduced these four sections or pillars that we wanted to talk to you about. And then you do have to have some sort of system or technique around how you're selling. That could be the form of the Excel spreadsheet or whatever, but go out and find out. Talk to experts in sales and all the rest of that. There's so much into it. And some of what we've already talked about is intertwined, being rooted in who you are. Jade brought this up a couple of weeks ago. You're not going to close a lot of deals if you don't really understand your value and know how to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. Because when it gets to that, it's kind of like the Adams apple. I got to go ask for money and pay me. But there's great books out there. There's a lot of expert. There's a ton of video out there on sales.
Community, ask your community, people that have done it, have been there. Yeah. And I think it also, if you can get comfortable with selling, it's also what your clients are doing and are going through on their side, right? So when you're doing it for yourself, it makes it more comfortable to talk about what they're doing on their side and how you can help them with theirs, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not going in, not blind, but inexperienced, because the experience that I say this all the time, Ted, so much experience that our members can garner, because they always think, oh, I've never had a client that you, right? Like everything Ted is teaching you and talking about here today in the last 4 weeks and the last 100 weeks that we've been doing this, is all his experience of doing this with his business that he is teaching to you. And you can see how valuable it all is, right? It was that one person that he's had this experience with doing. So sales, yes. So you're in business,
Well, it's funny you say that. My experience, how I became a salesperson, I just started telling people what I was up to.
Yeah.
And it was something that I never, I didn't talk to work in the neighborhood but I would just tell people what I'm up to. You never know what conversation you're going to be in with somebody. But you need to be proactive about that.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay. Final piece for our 4 pillars, Ted, of a takeaway or a lesson for today.
Yeah, it's hard to come up with this idea of what the specific homework is, because everybody's probably at different spots in this. But I do want you, one, as we did with the finance piece, like, have you identified that you actually are in sales? And are you able to adopt that instead of push it away like I did for far too long? And then the second piece would be, what do you need to, going back to what we talked about with the system and techniques, what do you need to implement into, I don't want to be so formal in the language, but your sales process?
Yeah. I think another third part to that, super important, is can you clearly articulate what you do, who you are, what you do, and who you serve, right? Because if you're having those conversations and you don't know that, it's going to be a lot more.
Well, that's what I mean. There's, again, I don't want to use the language. I was going to say complexity. That's why I slowed myself down. It doesn't have to be complex, but like Jade's brick brought up several things about the sales process, that I'm very privy to, but I'm not going to claim to be an expert in. But it does start with value proposition. It does start with how do you manage your sales process, your sales funnel. It goes into the art of the close, as they say. There's different parts of it. How to reach out to a cold lead. You'd be stupid, like I use the word stupid, yes. On LinkedIn, somebody's selling me right out of the gate for $10,000. Yes. What do you do with those? You swipe left, you get rid of them. And so how do you reach out to people and form some level of connection? There's all these different things. You should educate yourself on these things. If you're not educated, you should educate yourself on these things.
And guess what, Ted? I'm going to turn today right back on you. As comfortable as everybody has to get with being a salesperson, you have to be comfortable with being an expert, my friend, because you are an expert in this. Because 13 years of expertise and being able to teach, articulate, and help other people, that makes you an expert.
Well, I will tell you, here's my little piece of expert advice, because this is what's worked for me. I got rooted in my values and I focused on connection. And I leaned into something that my late father told me many years ago, but I actually started to believe in. And he used to say to me, let people discover you're brilliant. I believe I worked and I had the experience to do what I do today. But when I settled into who I was, and then they found out, oh, he's actually good on stage or in front of the room or doing these different things, then it was a no-brainer to engage with me. And so that's my little tidbit of being an expert. The sequence that Jade and I talked about in these last 4 weeks, it really does start with you. The other stuff that may have sounded complex is not, but it's all part of being in business for yourself.
Yeah, I love it. What a brilliant note to end on. Everyone, let everybody learn how brilliant and wonderful and fantastic you all are, because everybody is. And we shall see everybody next week. Thank you, Ted.
All right, Jade. Take care.